Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Talk Openly. I really was stunned today to realize that it was Tuesday. Like the week has gone by so fast.
Surprise!
I know, surprise. It's Talk Openly Day. And I really do think of it that way. Like in the morning, I wake up and it's Tuesday and it's like, oh, I get to talk to Daniel tonight. That's really nice.
Yay! Yeah, I feel the same way. Exactly.
Yeah.
But you're not kidding, man. Time's flying.
It really is. Oh my God, it's almost November. I mean, like in a week.
It's almost the year 2024.
No.
Okay, I'll stop.
I saw someone posted a meme the other day on Facebook, who I believe she's someone who like went to high school in the 80s.
Okay.
And it was like, guess what? The 80s were 50 years ago. Isn't that something?
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It's strange when I think
Isn't that true? No, it's not true, right? 40 years ago.
40 years ago.
I was like, wait, I was born in 89. That can't be true.
I was thinking to myself, I thought, well, I was born in the 70s and I'm not quite 50 yet. That's strange.
Yeah. Math is hard. Math is hard.
It's all right. I feel like sometimes it's okay just to accept that and be like, all right, well, we're good enough. It's about 40, 50 years ago. Either way, the point is 1980s was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Right?
Multiple decades. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I'm definitely one of those geriatrics that I cannot fathom that we live in this age, right? Like the 1990s where I was like yesterday, like, it was just like right there. But I'm pretty far away from the 1990s now. We're living in the future, Jack.
We are. I was thinking that today, like, because someone had sent out an email that there was going to be like a training in January. And I read it and it was like, yeah, January 5th, 2024. Is that correct? It just felt like, whoa, we're like a quarter of the way almost in the century.
Where am I? When am I? Oh.
Yeah. And if I didn't say it, I'm Jack, and I'm really happy to be joining you all. And I wanted to say, I was thinking that it might be good if during like every talk show we have like a little disclaimer, like we are students of Lama Jempa and we are learning, so take everything we say with a grain of salt and speak with your teacher, consult the Dharma.
I like it. Okay, I can run with a disclaimer for sure.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. But I'm really happy to be here. And tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about how challenging it is to have different opinions from others. And when we were talking about this show early on, we were talking about mostly like kind of interpersonal, like one-on-one stuff. So I imagine we're going to talk about some of that, but that it could also extend out to broader differences in opinion. So I think it's going to be a good show.
Yeah, it'll be fun to see what the overlap is between the two. Yes,
definitely. Well, how you been? What's your week been like?
I'm good. I'm very, very grateful that I'm now sort of out of necessity having to broadcast from the cottage near the temple. First of all, it's massively good vibes in here. Like, it's just a nice feeling when I open the door, the smell and the feeling and just everything. I'm like, yeah, like there's something kind of comforting about that. Yeah. The other thing is it's right next door to the temple. And on Tuesday nights at the exact same time, there's a meditation session happening in the dojo. And so if I arrive early or stay late, then I get to see our friends in the Sangha. Some of them who have shown up for meditation. And so inevitably, when the Talk Openly show is over, I'm still here for like another hour plus just talking and talking and talking. So yeah, it's like a social event. It's really nice. And here's another great thing. Right now, there's a a free book, or there's a book swap going on in the library. People are just dropping off all their Dharma books, and you can just take whatever you want, right? Like it's just a free exchange. And so I don't really need any more books. I have plenty of books that I need to read, right?
Yeah.
And so I was walking by the table just a while ago, and I stopped and I looked, and I was like, oh, this is really neat. Oh, I really could use, maybe that one looks really good, right? And so anyway, I ended up getting this little book right here.
Oh, that's lovely. Look at that drawing.
Isn't that cool? So it's called
nice.
Thus Spake the Buddha.
So
It's a
you don't
little.
hear spake very often, do you?
What's that?
You don't hear spake very often, do you?
No, I think it's a play on like Thus Spake Zarathustra, I think is the name of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, anyway, I think it's like a Nietzsche book, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway,
Okay. Yeah.
it's a tiny little book, right? Like look at my big head and look at this tiny little book.
That is
right?
teeny. Yeah.
So this is perfect for my backpack, I think, and just to have it with me. And then I also got another book, which is bigger, but I can't wait to read it. It is, I don't know if you can see.
Yeah. Hema's always, yes.
Hema Chodron, No Time to Lose, a timely guide to the way of the Bodhisattva. So
how exciting.
I think one of my favorite authors and one of my favorite subject matters, whoever had this book before me was a diligent student. You can see here, do you see this? There are all these little colored tabs up and down the paper here, right? Very nice. I can't wait to see if I can detect what it was on that page that made them put the marker there.
Yeah. Whoever's book that was, if you're watching, let us know at some point. That'd be so fun to hear.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
Learn about your organization skills.
Yeah. So I'm super stoked about that. I really don't need more books, but these two look good. It's too good to pass up.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And so that's what's happening here on a very limited scale, just tonight, right now. Generally speaking, life is good. It's still in this there's a lot of movement, I guess. It's settling down, but there's still a lot of movement and just getting adjusted to new life situation. But by and large, it's good. My practice is getting more and more steady and stable, which is fantastic. I had this experience this was just yesterday, where I went to the gym with my kid early in the morning, as we usually do. We get to the gym, we do some cardio, and then she says, Dad, I don't feel good. Like I don't think I can hang. And she doesn't, she's no wimp. Like she meant it. She wasn't feeling good, And so I was like, oh man, let's get you out of here. You don't need to be doing cardio if you're not feeling good. But then I also had to take him to school. So there was this gap of like a long time that I didn't know quite what to do with myself. And so part of me was like, well, I guess I could go and just start working, or something. I'd go to Starbucks and start working or something like that. But then I was like, no, I have plenty of time. I'm going to go to the temple instead. And so I did like a nice long session at the temple, and it was so beautiful. It was just like, it was magical to have that early morning time in the temple, plenty of it, no rush. I could really take my time and settle in. It was just a gorgeous way to start the day, to start the week. Fantastic.
Oh yeah, that's such a great use of your time. There's really no better use of time, is there?
No, there really isn't. And I gotta just say, like, I think the reason why I bring that up, it was a really good experience for me, but it was also just like a little reminder that if the opportunity affords, if there's an opportunity there to extend your meditation beyond whatever its usual sort of length is, and to really sink into it just a little bit longer, it could be well worth it. It was just so good.
Do you notice in your like long meditations, because I've definitely done longer before. I haven't lately, but I have done like an hour-long session, before. And it's almost like there's like these kind of chapters to the session, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Where yeah, it kind of like has this flow, this almost like narrative to it. And there's like a little, there's at least for me, it's like there's more of a recognition of the struggle, and then like the kind of giving it up when I'm
Yes.
really doing like a long meditation. There's a lot more where I have to accept this
Yeah.
is just what I'm doing right now, you know?
There's definitely the sort of the chapter part of it, where it has its different flavors. In fact, one time I was talking to Lama about this. He was giving me some advice before I was supposed to lead a meditation group. And he said that he really had a preference for breaking our meditations up in order to give it more of that like pronounced feeling of like, no, this is different. It's not just one long thing that where it's always the same. Like it really is changing. And that having like one session, let's say you're going to do 24 minutes, splitting it up 12 and 12 or something to that effect, and having like a moment of relaxation or like where you get up and you stretch and drink some water or whatever in between, that can be really, really helpful for us to see and perceive the differences. So I think that it like that can be like a shortcut to doing the same thing. Like you don't necessarily need to extend the time. You can just break up the sit a little bit. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's definitely like a story or a narrative that's happening. Even in the shorter sits, I had this experience this morning. I was meditating outside early in the morning, and there was this sort of like, it was very quiet in my mind, very, very quiet. Like the thoughts were not turbulent or anything. And then some birds started singing, and there was this sort of like this funny thought that occurred. I was like, oh, those are just my thoughts out there. And then of course it stimulated some thoughts in here. And then I was like, oh, and that's just the bird song in here. Right.
Oh.
Okay. I get it. It was a funny little aha sort of whatever. I don't know if it was really even anything sort of, it wasn't really like an epiphany. It was just a funny moment. But I did
And really
recognize it.
sweet too.
Yeah, and I recognized what you were saying was there was this like, oh, it was quiet, just like the morning air was still and quiet, and then causes and things changed, right? Things shifted, and morning light broke, and birds started singing, and cars started honking, and Daniel's
And
thoughts started exploding, right?
and there's not actually like a difference between that and the calm, you
That's
know?
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
yep.
how lovely.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, that's me in a nutshell.
Nice.
Yeah, that's what I got to report. What about you?
I'm doing all right. Little bit like some physical issues, like nothing bad, but being in a body is challenging at times. I don't know if this is too much information, but like at, in the last like couple months I've had some like just GI issues, like which is really unusual for me. And Yeah, it's just weird. It's like, why did my body suddenly decide that it was gonna be just be disruptive in this way?
Yeah.
um yeah, so it's just kind of funny to have a body and deal with that, and see that like it was a very kind of obvious shift from like believing, or just not even believing, but just not even noticing that I'm in this kind of feeling of like, this is how my body is, like my body does this. I don't even think about it. It's just permanently like this, to being like, oh wait, no, suddenly it's not. It's actually quite different. And so that was it's a good to take these moments as reminders that like, oh yeah, there is no like permanent self. There's no permanent body. It's constantly changing up on us,
Mm.
and dying too, so like
Yeah. Yeah.
right. So
Right.
yeah, it's been good and frustrating.
I'm sorry to hear about the GI issues, because that kind of thing, it's oftentimes so difficult to get down to like the what's causing it in the first place.
Yeah,
Like everybody I know, and anytime that I've had any kind of GI issues, it's like oftentimes like quite difficult to get at the heart of the matter.
it is. Yeah, because there's also like, so like it's not just like your eating or exercise, it's also, there's, mental stuff that
Oh
comes with
yeah,
GI issue, like
yeah.
anxiety, stress, depression, all those things affect.
And vice versa, Jack.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And so then sometimes you have GI issues, and then you realize, oh, I'm depressed and I'm anxious and I'm this and I'm that, because the two are interrelated, right?
Yeah. Well, I've
Yeah.
heard that the gut like kind of biome is really influential on mental health.
Yes,
Um,
indeed.
there's like a
Yeah.
direct line from the gut to the brain. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
Yeah.
what we eat is so important. Um, yeah, yeah. And well, and it's interesting too, because my diet hasn't changed at all.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, so that's one of the things. So talk about aging, right?
yeah.
So the most common thing that I have seen with my friends, I'm older than you, and
Mhm.
whatever. The most common thing that I've seen when it comes to this kind of thing is where in fact the diet has not changed, lifestyle has not changed,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden problems begin to present. And in many cases, it is the development of an allergy over a long period of exposure. So for example,
No.
yeah. So for example, my girlfriend had no problem for most of her life eating all kinds of bread and wheat, and no problem, no
Yeah.
issues, no nothing. But then all of a sudden things just started she'd get like itchy, and she had GI issues, whatever. And there was just like what do I do? And there was, oh my God, doctors are willing to give you all kinds of things to explore, different drugs, different treatments, different things to sort of narrow it down. Eventually someone said, well, why don't you just try, restricting your diet a bit, and then, go down to like very basic and start adding things in, and we'll see what's causing the trouble.
Mhm.
And it turned out gluten was a major problem. And it was odd to me. Just the other night, she was complaining about some issues, and she said, man, it feels like I've had some gluten, but I swear I haven't. Anyway, we went looking. It turned out some enchilada sauce that we had some kind, it had like vital wheat gluten in it or something, and I don't know what it was, but it didn't. It had gluten in it, and it was like, yeah, that's probably what did it,
Oh my
right?
gosh. Yeah,
Yeah,
I would be so bummed. I
I
mean,
know.
I
Oh,
totally like it would also be something that I know that I'd be excited to be like, okay, let's do this.
that's right. At least you'd
Um,
have a solution.
yeah, totally. But it's interesting because over the last couple years, I've been living with people who are 100% vegan.
Yeah,
And I've mostly eaten vegan, and at times, sometimes I'll, like, if I go out to a restaurant, I'll get something cheesy or might get chicken or something. Um, but typically my like home diet is vegan,
yeah,
and they eat a lot of bread. And on top
yeah.
of like like they're not always junk food vegan, but sometimes they're kind of junk
Oh
food
yeah,
vegan.
yeah.
Um, but on top of that, a lot of the meat substitutes have that like vital wheat gluten, which is like
Uh-huh.
a high gluten flour to make it like kind of meaty and whatnot.
Yep.
And it's delicious, but it's also like I can imagine that would not be happy on your belly if you were gluten
Yeah,
intolerant. Like that'd be really.
yeah.
And so that's interesting, because I wonder if over the last couple of years that I've been eating that diet, with a lot of kind of processed foods and whatnot, that might be shit.
I know as having been the junk food vegan, sort of gone down that route myself,
Uh-huh.
the hyper processed foods are trouble no matter what.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter. The packaging can say vegan, it can say
yeah,
vegetarian, it can say earth friendly, it can say sustainable, organic, whatever. I can have all the keywords, right?
yeah.
Everything. And it can even have like happy, peaceful pictures on the packaging,
Right.
But that
The
hyper
packaging's
processed,
green, so
yeah,
it
yeah.
looks.
Oh, of course it's green, right? And costs at least $10 more, whatever.
Yep.
But yeah, so in that hyper processed food is, generally speaking, not good for us on a regular basis, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter what in the raw ingredients were going in. They've all been transformed in some major way. It's not just the gluten stuff. It's also like soy protein isolate and that kind of thing. Like
Yeah.
super extracted things, like where on the one hand you have soybeans, they're fine, right? A whole soybean, nothing wrong with that. But when you start processing it in such a way that you're really just extracting, isolating certain compounds, it's no longer the same thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's not a diet.
Yeah.
I'm not a dietitian. I have a bad diet, and I don't know anything about food or diet.
You have a bad diet?
I don't even know why we're talking about this, Jack.
I think it's relevant because it's all relevant, right? But also just how like bodies and I think as meditators we really do need to have this healthy middle way relationship with our body where it's not that we need to like overly pamper it and spend thousands of dollars on the best food in the world or whatever, but to take care of it means that we can meditate and that our bodies will be like regulated and have energy so that we can focus, and so if I'm eating things that are disrupting my ability to train and meditate, that's important. So dang it, I don't want to change my diet. I like cake. I like Beyond Burger.
Yeah, I like it all. I like it all. If it has sugar, fat, and salt in it and some flavor.
Yeah, I've definitely been what's the word? Having intentional use of sugar. Almost like as like a substance where like I'm not kind of like mindlessly using it, but it'll be like, okay, it's 2:00, I'm feeling a slump, and I know that if I have caffeine, that's going to be bad. I can't have caffeine because I'll be up. But if I can like dose with some sugar, like that'll give me a little lift to like carry me through. So that's been interesting.
I know what you mean. Yeah. It's good to experiment.
Yeah, it's good to be aware of the experiment. Oh, well, thanks for listening. Otherwise I'm actually I feel really good. Life is actually like pretty joyful. I'm really enjoying my practice. Nice. I feel like, and this is partly too, I imagine, with where I'm at in my education and social work and whatnot, learning new skills of like how to communicate and what like kind of safe communication is within like the social work realm, and then also pairing that and also seeing like the relationships and the crossovers with like what does it mean to be safe within the Dharma kind of realm, and turns out they're very similar, but it's really fun to just like talk with someone. I would I shouldn't say it's fun to talk to someone in crisis, but like I really enjoy being able to like be with someone when they're in that state and use these skills and feel like, okay, I feel like I'm understanding what this is. Like I feel skillful, and that's just a good feeling,
Do the skills make you feel when you apply the skills that you've learned, do you feel like it increases the genuineness of the dialogue or the conversation?
Yes, though I think with like certain counseling skills, you could easily just kind of pair it and not be genuine. So
be sort of formulaic.
Yeah, which there's like kind of a process of having to like go through that of like, okay, it's gonna feel a little bit like formulaic until you figure out like how to be a person again. But no, so it's been really good, and
cool.
I owe everything to the Dharma. That's really like something I've been telling myself is like the only wealth is Dharma. Like all of these things that I'm learning, my ability to like get education, and stay present for it, it's all Dharma. So I just feel like kind of overwhelming gratitude these days. It's been nice.
Good
for the kind of like cognitive shift away from where I was a few months ago of being like, everything sucks and I don't want to be here and it's stupid.
Yeah.
Just being like, well, I'm doing it. So do it. And it's really changed things for me.
That's really beautiful. You met resistance, you used it to push yourself up to a higher place. From that higher place, you saw it wasn't so cloudy anymore. It was nice and sun. You got above the cloud layer, and now it's sunshiny. That's good.
And I think part of it was that like forced break that COVID gave me to be like, no, you just got to accept this. And
sometimes, yeah.
Yeah. And then kind of jump back into the world, with gratitude. So yeah, interesting stuff. Yeah. Well, on that note of training and skillful means, let's continue to develop our skillful means through Lojong.
All right, it is time for this week's random Lojong slogan.
Excellent. I'm excited.
Have we had this one before?
I don't think we have. So number 32, don't wait in ambush. Such a good word. I love ambush. I don't know why. The Tibetan version of this slogan literally says, don't ambush. That is, wait for somebody to fall down so that you can attack. You are waiting for that person to fall into the trap or problem you want or expect. You want them to have that misfortune, and you hope that misfortune will take place in a way which will allow you to attack. And that's from Choyam Trungpa, Training the Mind and Cultivating Loving Kindness. Woo! Yeah, I've never done that. Have you, Daniel?
I don't even know what this is talking about.
No idea.
It's sort of relevant to what we're talking about tonight with our differences, right? Like, certainly, I think that the ways that this has presented itself for me is when I know I'm right about something, about the way things are or the way things should be. I know I'm right. And somebody says that they're right and they have a different idea about it. They have a different belief or a different way of doing something, and it's not the same as mine, and I think they're wrong and whatever. Then of course I go and I wait in ambush and I'm like, ooh, okay, all right, come on, like let's see what happens when they prove me right. It's like that. It's like that kind of thing going on. I certainly have experienced that on numerous occasions. Probably still do.
There's so much spite in that, like so much vindictiveness. I definitely see myself do that with so just kind of dumb things like chores, where it's like, like I get really annoyed when people leave out like recycling or dishes or whatever. And like instead of just being like, you know what, with my recycling, I'm going to take that person's one thing and just put it in the bin, like, why not? But instead just kind of like leave it, just leave it there and let like the kind of frustration grow, build until it's like, why didn't you like move your recycling? Like, why is it still there?
That's right.
And just like waiting for that moment, right? Of like when I can, be a jerk to someone.
Right. But no, you're so kind because you're just teaching them, you're helping them to learn. They couldn't learn by listening to your wise words, right? And so, or maybe they never even heard them. And
because I didn't share it. Yeah.
You're going to help make sure that you're not going to like coddle them, right? You're going to make sure that they, actually get their comeuppance, right? That whatever the bad thing is that you knew was going to happen, that they experience that, because they have to experience that to learn. Otherwise, nothing will change.
Oh my gosh, it is such a mess. We are such a mess sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, this one is perfect for tonight. I'm really glad that it
this
came.
Is us.
Yeah. And show us the picture. Ooh, who's that fancy person?
This is Bodhisattva Padmapani.
Nice. Oh, I love the standing posture. I feel like you don't get to see that as often as other postures. Yeah. And what's kind of draped around them?
So I can't quite tell what's draped around them, and I can't Can I zoom in?
Look at that cool, I think, mustache.
Got the
Yeah, that
mustache.
was beautiful.
I don't know what's draped all around. It looks like maybe flowers
Okay.
or
Yeah,
something.
maybe Dirk can tell us. I bet you Dirk knows what.
We need to have Dirk back on the show.
Oh yeah, we do. We need to have other folks on the show too.
Yeah,
We got to
yeah,
contact some people. Been thinking
yeah.
about
All
it. Yeah.
right.
All right. Well, with that transition, working with differences.
That's tonight's subject.
That's tonight's subject. Yeah. And I, oftentimes when you bring up a topic, I'm curious, right? Like kind of where it originated, what
Yes,
made it come up
yes.
for you. So if you care.
Well, I'm gonna have to say this topic did not originate with me.
Mhm.
Um, it was suggested by one of our occasional listeners, who is my girlfriend. Uh,
Ah,
so she asked this, and I was like, yeah, well, I wonder what we should talk about. Whatever, just kind of talking about it. And she brought this up, and then she offered, when I said, well, why are you asking that question? Why are you bringing this up? And she gave me a little story, a hypothetical situation, a
uh-huh.
quote unquote hypothetical situation. She said, well, what happens if, for example, um, when you do dishes, you think that that dishes means, that not only do you clean the dishes, but you wash the sink and you clean the counter and
Hmm.
like you finish the job. You know what I mean? and I couldn't help but think back to the fact that I had just done the dishes and not wiped down the sink.
Uh-huh.
So I'm not so sure how hypothetical, I don't know how hypothetical the situation was for her. But I thought it was a good one, because it is one of the biggest sources of trouble in our lives, is these perceived differences between us, right? So it's kind of funny, within Buddhism, we have this concept of no self, and the interconnectedness of all beings. And at the same time, there's this deep-seated feeling in our lived experience of a real me and a real other, and they are different than me, and they're these. If everybody was just like me, the world would be a better place, right? If we could
Yeah.
all just be sort of the same, it would be so much better. But unfortunately, everybody's so wrong, or does things so dumb because they don't do it my way, so that's why we have trouble in the world.
Right.
There's this sort of deep see, everybody out of the 8 billion people plus on this planet, everybody has that same feeling.
Yeah.
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 It's just, it's idiocy. And yet, it's the most pronounced, I don't know, one of the most regular things that happens, because throughout the day, we're comparing and contrasting ourselves, our behavior, our speech, and our thoughts, our beliefs with those of other people. And that leads to us seeing perceiving these differences. And then we focus on them, we get attached to them, right? And we get sort of carried away with it. So I think it's it's a topic for endless discussion.
Mhm.
And I think that, the thing too is that, like you and I, you brought up, I think, either maybe before the show, is that this is applicable, at all levels. Like, so in the thing that brought it up for me was a close interpersonal relationship over something that was not that big of a deal, right? It was just sort of a point of contention or whatever. But the same kind of thing is happening on all levels, right? These perceived differences and views of, self being better than other and that type of thing. It's happening on all different levels of society. And we're seeing it play out, right? We're seeing it play out sort of in conflict. Yeah,
Yeah.
anyway, there's a lot to
Yeah.
be said about it. That's why I
There
brought it up.
is. Yeah. That no, and thank you. Yeah. And how interesting too, that kind of like little hypothetical situation,
Mhm.
from your
Yeah,
girlfriend. Like, um, it's interesting how it's those types of things that over time can like really erode a relationship, right? When there's
sure.
those kinds of differences that don't get addressed,
Mm-hmm.
um, or yeah, it's like, it's so fascinating how like those just little kind of cuts can really just become so deep. It's like, it almost like when we have a difference with someone like that, we end up seeing that as like their being, like that's their personality, right? That like my partner doesn't clean the counter in the way that I would, and that
Yeah.
means something about him that I don't like.
Oh, it
You
doesn't
know?
just mean something about him. It means something about you and how he feels about you. And,
Yeah, yeah,
right.
exactly. No, it becomes
Yeah.
like, does he not care about me and the house?
Right.
Like
Yes.
it like
He knows. He knows how I feel about this. Why isn't he doing it the way that I want
right.
him to do it?
Yeah. So like all these kind of like this build up really gets kind of entrenched. Yeah. And it's all about a misperceived self, and also just like poor communication,
Yeah,
like,
totally.
which I think poor communication often happens because we're worried about the self, right? We're like concerned about conflict and not being heard. And so we just,
That's right.
ignore it. Which is like, interesting because both passive aggression and overt aggression are like two sides of the same coin.
That's
Um,
right.
but they're both like about how can I like protect and preserve me, in my opinion,
That's right.
in the way that I feel is like, yes,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah, it's
Right.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Um,
Either you have to like tackle it, right? You have to somehow change things. You have to aggressively modify the behavior or whatever it is, the perceived difference to iron it out, or you have to avoid it. If you avoid it, then of course it just possibly continues to fester and to
yeah,
build, right?
yeah,
And then that exaggerated sort of distorted view of reality becomes bigger and bigger as we hyper focus on it, gets bigger and bigger and gets way blown out of proportion. And then we can't see straight because the freaking toilet
mhm.
paper is on backwards. It's going
Oh,
under instead of over the way
no,
it's supposed to be.
it well, okay, if you're an over person, then yes, that there's no excuse for the under toilet paper. So yes, that one's just hands down the other person's wrong.
I think this is the funny that we could do this all day. I actually, before I walked in here, I was talking to Bill Delzell, and
Uh-huh.
I said something about toilet seats, and he said, "Well, of course, seat up is the only way."
Oh, uh-huh.
And I was like, man, I know those are like fighting words, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, like there
yeah.
are plenty of people who would take issue with that
Oh,
one.
yeah. Well, and yeah, that gets into all types of things around gender
Oh
and
yeah.
like, yeah,
Oh,
who should be putting that, whose responsibility is it to be taking care of the toilet seat? Like, because maybe a person who doesn't have a penis, should they be the one to put the seat up for the person who does?
yeah.
I believe not, right? Because we've been oppressed by penis havers for millennia. So you can put the toilet seat down, but
Right. Right.
that's like the thing. That's like,
This is the thing.
yeah,
And well, that's what's funny, but we're laughing, and yet this is in fact the kind of stupid, nonsensical stuff that is
yeah,
causing such divisiveness
yeah,
throughout our culture.
yeah, yes. Yeah. And that makes those interpersonal relationships just so fraught. And
Yes.
when they really don't have to be. And I think there's like, maybe what we're coming towards is like, uh as usual, right, there's got to be some kind of middle way approach to to working on these things, because there is, there's validity to having an opinion about something, right? Like maybe it's just true, like the counter gets dirty and we don't want a dirty counter, right? Because that's, not good for the food that we eat, right? Like there's reasons, and yet it becomes this whole huge story. And so it's like we have to kind of find that middle approach to like not saying anything and being resentful, or like over saying, like being aggressive and like only wanting our way, because we think that it's the only way. Yeah, there's got to be a different approach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's just it, is that the typical sort of reactions to these perceived differences usually don't lead to positive outcomes. There has to be some type of willingness to come together to find that middle ground, right? There has to be. And, to the degree that we're talking about it, I think, I mean, within the context of Buddhism, it's really, I don't think that we really need to talk about all of the extensive differences and the ways it can manifest, but just to say, like, these perceived differences are the source of a lot of conflict, a lot of suffering in this world, both interpersonally and socially. And so what we really aim to do is reduce our suffering and that of others, right? And how can we do that when it comes to these differences? Like, what does it look like to find that middle ground, or to work towards it at least?
Yeah. I have one idea. So one idea that comes up for me is like, also thinking in terms of like, how actually important is this particular issue?
Yeah.
And there's some gray area to that. But like, for example, like my partner is he he makes dinner differently than I do. I have a very kind of like, I'm pretty good. See, that's a judgment, right? All right. I'm saying like, I'm pretty good at like, so here's what I'm good at. I'm good at like timing things so that it all kind of gets done in like, another judgment, a timely manner, right? Where like Eric's a little bit more spontaneous, like he'll kind of start chopping stuff, he'll like
Right.
get into it, kind of hang out, listen to a podcast or something.
Yeah.
And what happens is that he'll like forget to turn on the oven. And so all the prep has been done, but the oven's not on. So then dinner takes like a whole another half hour,
Sure.
So for me, I get frustrated, right? Because I'm like, listen, the way that you should do this is to think in terms of like linear time. What?
I can feel the condescending sort of talking down to a small child.
I know. He just lives in such a different world than I do. I am so like kind of like, I'm really I'm like a by the minute type person.
Sure.
And he's just not. And like, and that's okay. And so like, can I be okay with like dinner being like 20 to 30 minutes later than it might have been? That it's not a big deal, right? Like no one's getting hurt. Someone's cooking for me, right? Like I'm receiving something from this, like from his labor.
Right.
It's okay. Like it's just okay. So that's an example of one where like I really have to examine, is this like just my arrogance being like, I know how to do this, like I'm good at this and you should do it that way? And is it possible for me in those moments to just kind of say, I'm gonna let this one go? Like,
yeah,
this doesn't have to be an argument. It doesn't have to be like turn into this thing about like his personality, like and be like a character flaw or something.
right.
It doesn't need to go there.
Right.
And I can go and meditate or like do some exercise, whatever. And then there's maybe things that feel more important to me, like, and I know I'm talking a lot, but so feel free to interrupt, but there was this moment at work the other day where there's this woman, a patient, who had just arrived on the unit, and she had come from the psychiatric ICU, so like very high acuity, and on that unit people aren't allowed to wear any jewelry, and so she comes on this unit, And there's people who have like a nose ring or like a bracelet, a watch. And so she starts asking the nurses like, hey, can I have like some of my jewelry? Like people are wearing jewelry. And, she gets kind of like all different kinds of answers. And so she starts to get kind of frustrated. Like, what's going on here? Is it because I'm Black? Like, is this like a racial thing? Like that you're not allowing me to wear jewelry? And so I kind of talked with her about this and just listened. And I went to the nursing staff and I was like, hey, can we kind of figure this out for this person? This is affecting her. And, because of her experiences, she's feeling, that there's a racial element to it. And one of the nurses got really mad. And he was like, I think you should go back and tell her that it's offensive to say that that's racist. And I was like, oh, actually, I disagree. Like I really disagree, and so that felt like a moment where it was like, okay, I'm not gonna let, like I'm not going to not share my opinion there, because it's important, like, about this person's care, and that they're not going to receive, or they're, because of how they're feeling, they're not going to receive good care in that moment until we address this issue. And so, I just let him know, like, this person's experience has been that she's lived for decades, experiencing racism. And so when she sees kind of a disparity, that's what she's going to go to, even if it's not like technically the case, like that is her experience. And so anyway, so that kind of felt like, okay, here's a case of differences in opinion where I feel like I do need to assert, no, here's my opinion and here's why I think that it's really valid. So there's kind of like maybe there was a difference between those two examples of like things being about me or not about me. Like the first one is all about, right, like that I have a good way of doing things and my partner's not doing it my way.
Yeah.
And the second is like, no, I see how this difference in opinion is affecting people's lives or something. And it wasn't about me. It was about like, let's make sure that this person is being cared for.
But even if it was about you,
sure,
it's still, it's equally valid, right?
Totally,
even if, like I hear what you're saying, but I think that that's the interesting sort of interplay here, is that it is this sort of like, I have a right to express my opinion. The other person might benefit from what I'm saying, right? There is a time for action. There's a time to offer correction if something, if someone's doing something unskillfully from our perception, but it's our motivation, our attitude, the way we approach it, all of that stuff matters, right? And what we're trying to do is we're trying to avoid the typical reactive state, the normal sort of way of responding to these perceived differences. And then instead, like if we can come at it with some awareness, if we can see like, oh, there's me, those are my solid beliefs, that's my biases, this is my whatever, my cultural attitudes or whatever, I get it, that my experience has been conditioned just like everybody else's experiences has been conditioned. If you can come at it with a certain sort of awareness, you can respond to it in a much more positive way, right? Yes. It doesn't mean, and I think that on the receiving side, this has a lot to do with like our conversation about receiving criticism, because it's on both sides. Sometimes we're the ones who are different, right? It's easy to say like, oh, well, that person is different and, they're not living according to my expectations. But sometimes we're the ones who are not living according to other people's expectations.
Who might have like a harmful opinion.
That's right. And their feelings, their opinions, their everything are as valid as ours are, even if they're not approaching it as skillfully as we wish they were, right? And who are we to say whether they're approaching it skillfully or not anyway, right? But I think that it really is a matter of your motivation and your intention in all of it. Because we can't, there's no hard and fast rule for dealing with this, right? Sometimes it's best to just let it go. Right. Take a chill pill. It's not that big of a deal. Whatever those differences are, it's okay. Sometimes it's good to just sort of like take a step back and maybe see more of our similarities, right? We hyper focus on these differences, we blow them all out of proportion. And so it's good to have a little practice. There's a number of different practices where we can sort of like mitigate the damage that comes from our exaggerated sense of self-importance and minimizing other people. Maybe that's what we do, right? There's different ways of handling it, but I think that deep down inside, if we want to have peace, if we want to have good relationships with other people, we want to find that middle ground, then we can get there, right? And hopefully the other person feels the same way, but we have to be prepared to act on our own, because we can't expect other people to step up to the plate. That's our responsibility, right? Just like when we perceive the difference, right? Like, and we see that we're being affected in some way by what somebody is saying or doing, or the beliefs that they're acting on, we're responsible for our own feelings in that situation, right? Yeah. Like we're like, that's me. That's right. It's not them.
It's not their fault. Yeah, it's not their fault.
And it's in many cases, in so many cases, it's not personal either. We make it all personal, right? Yeah. Oh, them saying it's racist, now I'm offended, right? Like, so it becomes so personal. And that's the problem, is the involvement of the ego, the egoic reactions that are so conditioned for all of us, right? That's the problem. And it's not going to be resolved until one of the parties, at least, steps up to the plate.
Yeah. And that there's a way to do this where we recognize the humanity of the other person, the person that we're, trying to share, like, I don't have the same opinion.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to dehumanize in that moment. Like, I used to be really, really just like, and I can't say that it's not all gone, right? But like, I used to be just so annoyed and like pissed off with white people who like, couldn't hear stuff around race.
Yeah.
Like I would just get kind of like a physical reaction and like really treat them differently, right? Like when like sure. But that doesn't do anything to help that person maybe learn something that could benefit them and other people. And so it's really, really taken me time and meditation, I think, to be able to have these kinds of conversations and see that like that person is like, yeah, you're another human who's like on their journey of like understanding these very complex issues, right. And that really trigger all of our kind of ego defenses, right? Because if so much of the conversation, the cultural conversation is like, I can see why some white people who haven't done a lot of reflection on this stuff, just get very much like, how dare you? Like, how could you say that I'm a racist? I'm not, right. Like, I'm not a virulent racist. And
right.
So when I actually reflect on that, it's like, okay, that makes sense. And I, can I just like kindly say like, you know what, I disagree. And here's why. And I think one thing that was good is that we ended the conversation on a good note. Like I wanted to make sure that this person knew that like I didn't think that they were effed up, right. Like so there's like the Dharma really teaches us how to be skillful and be firm, right? Like like compassion we're not doormats. And so that's I'm really glad that you brought up that it's not just in the case of helping others, but also that sometimes we have to share an opinion because it's protecting ourselves.
Absolutely.
So we're not doormats. We can share our opinions and things that we need. So
right, but it's about, I think that it's about the mindset, and how you come at it. Like, one of the thought that came to my mind when I was just thinking about this was, that the idea of trying to cultivate beginner's mind, because so much of the problems come about by knowing ahead of time how that other person is. So we were like, oh, I heard them express something from, that makes me think that they're just a class. I'm going to put them into this group of, they're like old white male conservative, yada yada yada. They fit the bill, therefore they're like this, right? And we have all this knowingness. We don't know anything, actually. We don't. There's very little that we can be certain of, right? And those things that we can be certain of usually are not the kinds of things that show up in these discussions around differences, right? Everything else, it's better to relax ourselves and be a little bit more open, because, you know, maybe we don't understand the situation fully, right? Yeah. Having some curiosity, having, you know, having compassion and having a sense of humor around these things, loosening up a bit, right? Is important. Being able to hear what the other person has to say, to really experience them. It reminds me, actually, I couldn't help but think also of, you know, like a little bit of like quantum physics, right? You know, you've heard of the observer effect. So, yeah. Right. So by measuring a system or by observing a quantum system, we inevitably affect that system. The thing that we're observing is affected by our observation of it. And so when we observe the difference, right, how we observe that difference matters. It will, in fact, affect how that difference impacts ourselves and other people. So that if we're able to keep a beginner's mind and be a little bit more open, if we can sort of shift our attitude, try really hard to not make it so personal and so much about ourselves, if we can really, you know, apply the Dharma, if we can do that, then, you know, when we observe that system, our intention and what we bring to it, our bodhisattva ideals, you know, our activities, right, then we can influence it in a really positive way. And it doesn't matter whether that means us taking action by stepping in and setting firm boundaries, or telling people what we think, or taking a step back and shutting up. Yeah, right. Yeah. Whatever the right course of action is, it'll arise properly from that. That's why our training is so important. Yes.
Yes. And I love that that idea of remaining curious, right? Just like being like, wow, what did you mean by that? You know, tell me more. Right. I really want to understand where you're coming from. And that when we actually, you know, we have almost like, you know, I was talking earlier about these kind of counseling skills, like we have to practice saying those things until they become natural. You know, I think that, like, you know, Lama is such a great example of someone who can just listen to some of the most absurd things, right? Like I've brought up some just weird stuff in Darshan, and I know you've shared that you have too, you know, and just like the compassion and the curiosity and it doesn't mean that he like accepts our conclusions or opinions, but he's gonna listen. And so I love that openness and that patience that the Dharma brings us, that patience to not have to like override someone and be like, no, this is the right way to do it. You know? To just be like, we're just gonna get to know what our— That's right. I mean, that's what we, you know, the disclaimer at the outside of the show was that we are students, right? We are learning. We don't want to shut down opportunities to learning by having already known, right? So like, if we can be open to it, if we can be a bit more like Lama and just observe and see and try to take ourselves, our little personal selves out of the equation, a lot of times the problems, the things that bother us based on these perceived differences turn out not to even be the case. It's not even what you think. What's happening isn't even what you think is happening. Yeah. I think I heard about the recommendation to be like a baby, you know, to be like an infant, just kind of like, wow, what is going on here? Yeah. You know? Yes. Like, let me just take it in. Right. Just giggle and laugh and fart. It's good. Just like total beginner's mind, you know? Totally. Right. It's all good. It's all good. Well, I can't believe it. It's already 8 o'clock. I feel like I could talk a whole nother hour with you about this topic. I could talk a whole nother hour just relating it to quantum physics, which I know nothing about either, but you know, I'd be willing to try. Yeah, I mean, I'd be willing to listen and actively reflect.
You'd have to tell me how I was wrong, though.
Okay, I'll try. Well, Daniel, it's been another blessing of a Tuesday with you. And
Yes,
yeah, I just
you're the
really,
best, Jack. I enjoy
oh,
talking to you so
I enjoyed
much.
talking to you too. And to all of our listeners, we really appreciate you. One little quick note, if you enjoy the show, and you want to support Lions Roar, please donate. There's a donation button on the Lions Roar Dharma Center website. Consider even just dropping like $5 in there, which is cheaper than a latte these days. So
That is
that would be wonderful if you've been listening. So thanks,
cool. Thanks,
everybody.
Jack.
Yeah, take care.
Bye-bye.